that question, and what I meant to say was that actually we will continue with the current policy as it currently stands and look to make it more effective. So the position is the same as the government's.
How do you think you went?
Sorry?
How do you think you went?
Look, I really enjoyed it. And I hope that actually for New Zealanders watching it was a good chance for them to get a sense of what both parties have on offer. Again, my message was pretty simple. I think when you take away all the noise and boil this election down, it's all about who's the best economic managers to help us get out of where we are. And also, I think hopefully the choice is pretty stark for New Zealanders to see. It's either the coalition of chaos or a strong, stable national government.
That high school debating experience come in handy?
Well, look, I just enjoyed it. I mean, it went very fast, I have to say. Each of those sections, didn't feel like 15 minutes or 7 minutes or 9 minutes. It was incredibly quick and fast.
Can I clarify one of your statements on SFCLs yesterday? You just added in a not at this time when you were ruling them out. Are you firmly ruling out partial or full SFCLs?
Yes, and I did it over a year ago. Yep, that's not our policy.
There's bipartisanship between Labour and National on foreign affairs.
Yeah, there is.
National has consistently said that the Russian ambassador should be expelled from New Zealand, something the government hasn't done. If you become Prime Minister in a month's time, will you be telling the Russian ambassador to get out of New Zealand? Well,
look, I just think that, we've got a government, we're not going to be able to do any business with there, and it sends a very strong message back to Russia that we're actually not supportive of their actions in the Ukraine. As we've said, that's been our position and our policy. But just in the broad and in the round, what I'd say to you is I think that is something good about our New Zealand political system, is that actually when you do have a change of government, there might be nuances and differences at a nuanced level, but by and large, we try and be on the same page. And I think, both Chris Hipkins and myself would have very similar positions on how we develop and protect our interests internationally, but also how we work with our partners and other countries across the world.
We heard from...
Sorry?
Do you think people would have made their mind up tonight if they maybe had? Do you think either of you move the dial at all? Well,
look, I hope it was a good platform actually for people to actually hear us both speak, present our respective ideas about how to take the country forward. And I appreciated actually being able to have a little bit of time to unpack some of that thinking and to be able to convey that to the New Zealand people. I want them to know, this is a fantastic country. We can be so much better. But I think the National Party and a national-led government is the right way forward.
We heard earlier...
But, you or Mr Hipkins are reaching or speaking to the people who might be disconnected from this campaign, who might not be that interested. Do you think you're firing up the interest that... Well,
look, the debate's only one aspect of a campaign. As you know, I've spoken to probably 10 or 11,000 people just through back on track tours and public meetings. That's also a very good mechanism for people to be able to engage with our policies and our plans and our ideas. This is another vehicle for doing that. And each and every day the campaign presents an opportunity to talk about that as well. So, it's one part of a campaign. And I hope if there's people out there that are thinking about where the direction of the country's going, might well be people who've never voted National before, and I really, they might have heard that we are serious about education and healthcare and crime.
You said tonight that free dental wasn't the priority. Can you name two health policies that you think are a bigger priority than free dental?
Really making sure we solve our doctor shortage of 1,700 doctors, and our second piece is actually making sure we solve our 4,500 nurses shortfall. Those are the things that, coupled with wait list times, that we have to be able to get down and under control.
Can I also just ask, you've talked tonight about targeted rates in the context of urban development. Can you just explain what do you mean by targeted rates?
So if you look at our housing for growth policy, what we're saying there is that we actually need to open up, say, greenfields. We want to, densify over transport hubs. That's one thing you can do in good, dense population cities. That's a smart thing to do. But also, we also acknowledge that we have to open up, greenfield space for development as well. And rather than doing it in a very ad hoc way where actually land gets rezoned from farmland to residential, and then you see people make, big gains off the back of that, we think councils should do what they do in other parts of the world, lay up 30 years worth of housing growth and rezone land to do just that. But then developers going in can actually make available to them innovative and different funding and financing tools. And for example, an example might be a council being able to use a targeted rate on a new development and apply that to the residents going into that new development to fund the infrastructure that has supported that development, rather than actually having everyone in the rest of the city subsidise it.
How does it work in a rural sense?
Again, I just encourage you to go look at the housing for growth policy that Chris Bishop and I talked about, a month or so ago. But what we're saying is, got to open up the land, rezone it. You've got to make sure you've got some innovative funding and financing tools, and then you give councils a share of incentive for growth, which is actually not what's working for them today.
Just for the record,
you left the door open for banning prescription only
for making vapes prescription only, what would tip you over the edge?
Well, look, I want to see these new measures implemented well, and I want to see what impact they have. But I am leaving the door open, because if we need to go further, we will go further. But let's give the new measures a good go, and let's see how what they do for us to make sure that we get young people off vapes. Because we don't want to create a whole new bubble of addiction over the next 30 years that we're wrestling with.
And how would you describe that debate?
Hopefully, it's hard when you're actually doing it and in the middle of it all as to what it feels like from a viewer's perspective. But I think both of us were respectful. I think it was a good opportunity to canvass quite a broad set of topics, and hopefully that the New Zealand people got something out of that and got a better sense of who we are as leaders, and importantly, what our policies and plans are to take the country forward.
Just for the record, did you win?
That's for others to decide. That's for viewers and commentators like yourselves. I'm sure we'll have lots of navel-gazing about it, but I'm moving forward and getting on with the rest of the campaign tomorrow.
Out of 10, how do you think you did?
Oh, well, I really enjoyed it.
That's not a
I really enjoyed it.
number.
Yeah, I'll probably give myself an 8 out of 10.
Were you surprised by how much you and Mr. Hipkins had in common, particularly in those quickfires?
No, not really. There were positions I think we both knew of each other pretty well. But yes, there's areas of commonality, but I think people actually saw that there's also areas of difference. And what I want people to get a sense of is that I really want New Zealand to do well, and for that to happen, we now have to get things done. We have a great country. We can come together. We can go to work, and we can build the country we all want to live in.
And you seemed a little bit flummoxed by that question on the sugar tax. Why is that something you haven't thought about?
Well, look, in the scheme of things, frankly, I've got to make sure that we can get nurses here. When you spend a year discussing why nurses can't go on a green list, rather than when we've got a 4,500 nurse shortfall, that is an example of what I'm talking about. The time for talk and debate is over. We have to get nurses here, whether we home grow them or whether we bring them into this country. That's a bigger priority right here, right now.
You said that you purchased your first home around the age of 24.
Yeah.
Do you accept that's out of touch with young communities these days?
Well, I know it's challenging. It's very challenging. I remember what it was like, as I explained. For Amanda and I, we stretched and saved everything to buy that first house in Nio. Amanda was in her first job teaching. I was in my first job out of university in Petone. And, we did everything to buy that house. And then the interest rates went up. And then we were really challenged and stressed about it. So I know what that feels like. Just yesterday I was in with budgeting services again, hearing the stories of a young couple trying to actually survive with their incomes in very difficult times. So I know it's tough and hard for New Zealand young people out there to purchase a home, and our job is to actually increase the supply of houses in the home ownership sector. It's about opening up and increasing the supply of rental properties, and ultimately opening up the level estate houses that we can provide as well.
Is your contribution to climate action really just recycling and your wife's testing?
No, well, no. What my contribution is making sure the National Party has a policy that actually will march our emissions down in this country. And again, I hit it not in an ideological way. It's just a problem to be solved. And actually, that's what you've got to do: is take each category of emissions, transport, manufacturing, drive the country into more adoption of renewable, clean, green energy, abundantly provided. Make sure you open up EV charges, and then also have a sensible pathway through the agricultural emissions challenge, which if we get right, we can actually invent for the world and other agricultural nations to follow too.
You get quite a bit of flack for overuse of particular phrases. You were actually pretty good on the old bingo card.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that.
Have you been sort of hammering it into yourself that you need to stop saying that stuff over and over again?
Well, look, I really appreciate that, Phoebe. That's the nicest thing you've said to me in my 2 years in Parliament. I really appreciate it. Look, I mean, as I said to you, and I said again tonight, I haven't been a career politician, and so I've been in Parliament 2.5 years, and I've been on a very steep learning curve, and I'm trying to make sure that I can communicate with more preciseness, and I'll continue to work on that.
So you've been conscious of that then?
Would you expect the comm staff at the Ministry of Health to get the boot the minute you become...
Well, my point is really simple. We either have a problem with nurses or we don't, and we do. We've got 4,500 nurses short. So why aren't we doing a full court press to do everything we possibly can to actually make sure resources are going to that challenge at the front line rather than building bureaucracy sitting in Wellington?
So
who's going to do that full court press if you've got rid of all the communications?
Well, I tell you, what's happened there is only two numbers New Zealanders need to know. 80% increase in government spending and $100 billion worth of debt. And when you've actually seen key agencies go from 5.7 billion to 9.1 billion, there's an awful lot of waste to come out of that system and the back office functions that needs to be redeployed to the front line.
Do you, with respect to that, do you accept that Refood shows that the forecast expenditure over the next 3 to 4 years is going to grow at roughly the rate of inflation.
Yeah, there's about another $7.5 billion from memory coming in government spending over the next 4 years. When you look at pre-fu, what's incredibly worrying is that inflation and interest rates staying higher for longer. You've got pretty much anemic or low growth as a forecast at this point, remember. And what's more worrying is the huge current account deficit and the massive amounts of debt. This is a country that's gone from $5 billion worth of debt in 2019 to $100 billion today. It's had an 80% increase in government spending. And what do we have to show for it? Absolutely nothing.
Not much a government can do about the current account deficit, though, is there?
Well, actually, I think this government could be doing a lot. Actually getting out there in the world, hustling, building out more trade in 195 countries around the world, selling our great New Zealand products and services to 8 billion people. That's job number one. Sorry, question?
On the question about being scared, do you think both of you seemed a bit out of touch, and how do you think that you'll...
Sorry, what was the question?
The question about, Jess asked about being scared when it comes to crime. Do you think both you and Chris seemed a bit out of touch there, and how will you understand what other people are going through?
Because I'm usually spending time with victims of crime, if not every second day, most weeks. And when you sit down with them and you talk about what has happened to them, they actually feel this is government that's been on the side of the offender, not the side of the victim. And so I understand for real what it feels like. I can tell you lots of stories about people who are sitting in a dairy tonight, living above the store, actually freaked out as to what's going to be happening after 9 o'clock tonight for them. And so I understand what's happening for crime, and it's disingenuous of Chris Hipkins to say everything's fine, because it's not fine. Everyone knows in New Zealand that crime is out of control. Everybody feels it. They feel less safe in their homes, their businesses, their communities, and that's a primary responsibility of a government to make sure its citizens feel safe. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Appreciate your time. Take care. Bye-bye.
I'm not that mean either.
That was very nice of you.
Should have answered that question. What I will say is...
Shh, be clear.
Down, and we still don't know how the National Party is going to pay for their tax plans, but thoroughly enjoyed the debate this evening. Happy to take your questions.
Just on the question of...
You said that Kiwi Build was an unrealistic promise. Did you ever believe in Kiwi Build?
Look, I supported Kiwi Build at the time, of course I did, but clearly it was an unrealistic promise.
So it's just hindsight that you realise that?
We've clearly refocused our efforts on making sure we're stimulating private sector, housing developments. We're building about 40,000 houses a year now through the private sector, and that is a significant increase. And we're building more public homes. We've built 13,000 so far, and we've got many more, under construction.
Just when you had any doubts early on about Kiwi Build?
I certainly thought it was going to be an ambitious commitment.
When you were talking about the sugar tax, you said at the moment you've banned fizzy drinks in primary schools and you would like to see it banned in secondary schools. Is that a Labour Party policy, something that you're going to announce on the campaign trail?
I think I basically just did.
Why, well, okay, could you go into a little bit of detail about why you think this is something that you want to do? What's the problem as it currently stands?
Because we know that, kids dental health is significantly improved if we cut down on the sugary drinks that they consume, particularly when they're at school. Now, if parents want to serve them to them at home, that's parents' choice, but they shouldn't be serving them up at school.
So if this has been such a success in primary schools, why did it take you this long to decide that you wanted to do it in secondary schools?
Well, because we've now got the evidence to show that it's been successful in primary schools.
Just to get it clear on the record, you said 24 in the debate, but were you 22 when you bought your first home, is that right?
I was in my early 20s. My brother and I shared a deposit. Basically, we put together a deposit between the two of us, so I would have been around that 22, 23 mark.
A lot of people will look at that and go, the two people who want to be Prime Minister were in their early 20s and have absolutely no clue of what it's like for people at the moment. Can you appreciate that sentiment would exist for people?
I absolutely accept that it's getting harder and harder for first home buyers. That's why I'm very focused on making sure that we're supporting first home buyers. It's why I'm prioritising them over overseas investors when it comes to buying New Zealand houses.
Do you think that the public learned anything new today out of this debate?
Well, I think I learned that even with a lot of interjection, you can't get Christopher Luxon to answer a question.
You did about 55 minutes for you to get really fired up, and that was during co-governance when you really went for Chris Luxon. What about that topic? Why did it take so long for you to kind of fire up like that?
I object to the politics of dividing New Zealanders in order to secure votes.
Why do you oppose the decriminalisation of cannabis?
I respect the fact that New Zealanders have voted in a referendum on that, and I don't intend to change the outcome. I'm not going to go against that referendum.
How did you vote in that referendum?
I voted in favour of it, in favour of change, but I respect the fact that we've had a referendum and New Zealanders have made their views clear.
Compared to how you perform the House, do you think you're quite restrained?
I was listening carefully for Christopher Luxon to answer the questions, and he clearly didn't.
Do you think you won?
The viewers out there can judge that.
What would you give yourself out of 10?
I'm never really very good at giving myself a numerical ranking. Again, other people can judge that.
No, just have a crack. Go on.
Maybe an 8.
Oh, yeah. Christopher Luxon said the same thing. I mean, you guys are very level pegging.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Quick fire questions. Did that surprise you at all?
No, not at all.
You said that you could delegate more. Can you and can Kiwis actually trust your cabinet considering the number of ministerial scandals that we've had in the last year?
Yes.
Why is that? Why should we trust you?
I've set very high standards for ministers, and I've made it very clear to ministers that there are consequences when they don't meet them.
So just on that quick fire, why didn't it surprise you that you guys had so many similarities?
Well, I think the questions were, just the nature of those questions, they were on the sorts of topics where there's likely to be a lot of common ground.
Is it really fair to say that ACT and New Zealand First are propping up the anti-vax movement?
Well, if you look at the, Winston Peters is actively courting anti-vaxxers, and David Seymour seems to have quite a few of them on his party list.
And it took about 5 minutes into the debate for a senior National MP to say that you were going negative. Do you think that you went negative in that debate?
I think they were primed to say that right from the very beginning. I think Christopher Luxon was incredibly negative right at the beginning.
What did you do best in that debate?
I answered the questions.
Do you think you resonated?
It's not a very high bar.
Well, it is when the person next to you isn't.
Do you think you resonated with voters?
Voters can make their own judgments on that.
Do you take any lessons, or what would you do different with the next debate?
Look, I'll go away and I'll reflect on that. I really enjoyed the debate. I think it was a good opportunity to debate a range of issues. You always learn something as you're doing these sorts of debates. I learned that no matter how many times you ask him a question, Christopher Luxon will continue to refuse to answer it. I have a lot more sympathy for you guys now than I did before.
Are you going to watch the whole thing back?
I haven't decided that yet. I've never particularly enjoyed watching myself on TV, but I might do it as a preparation for the next one. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.